Commander Jake Sullivan stood at the large window of Earth Defense Station Alpha, watching the endless stars stretch across the black sky. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he did not notice. The reports on his desk told a story that made his stomach twist with worry. 12 ships had vanished in the past month. All of them had been traveling near the Horsehead Nebula, a massive cloud of gas and dust that looked like a horse's head when seen from Earth. The nebula was supposed to be safe. Ships had been flying through it for 20 years without any problems, but now something was wrong. The first ship to disappear was the cargo vessel, Blue Ridge. Captain Tom Baker had been hauling mining equipment to the outer colonies when his ship simply stopped sending signals. Search teams found nothing but empty space where the Blue Ridge should have been. Then came the passenger liner Golden Eagle. 300 people on their way to start new lives on distant worlds, gone without a trace. The search ships reported strange energy readings in the area, but their instruments could not make sense of what they were detecting. More ships followed. The freight hauler Montana Pride, the research vessel Starseeker, the colony transport New Frontier. Each time, the same pattern. Ships would enter the nebula and never come out. No distress calls, no wreckage. Just silence. Jake ran his hand through his graying hair and picked up the latest report. This one was different. This one had survivors. The mining ship Dusty Trail had been attacked 3 days ago. Only 2 crew members made it to the escape pods. When the rescue team found them, both men were nearly mad with fear. They spoke of ghostly ships that appeared out of nowhere, vessels that seemed to be made of starlight and shadow. They came at us like riders in the night, one survivor had said, his hands shaking as he spoke. But they weren't real. They couldn't be real. Ships don't glow like that. Ships don't move without engines. The other survivor had been even worse. He kept talking about voices in his head, voices of dead men calling for help. The medical team had to sedate him just to get him to stop screaming. Jake's communication device beeped. He pressed the button and heard the voice of Admiral Patricia Cole, his superior officer. "Jake, we just lost another one," she said. Her voice was tight with worry. The colony ship New Montana. She was carrying 8,000 people to establish a settlement on Kepler 442b. Jake felt his heart sink. 8,000 people, families, children, all gone. Any survivors this time? He asked. One escape pod. The pilot managed to get a message out before ... Admiral Cole paused. "Jake, you need to hear this recording." The Admiral sent the audio file to Jake's computer. He played it and listened to the terrified voice of a young woman. "This is Lieutenant Amy Carter of the colony ship New Montana. We are under attack by unknown vessels. They look like ghost ships. I can see through them, but they're firing real weapons. The hull is breaching on all decks. The passengers? Oh God, the passengers are." The recording cut to static, then silence. Jake closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The Kepler Empire, humanity's alien allies, had dismissed these reports as human imagination. They said humans were too emotional, too quick to believe in spirits and monsters. But Jake knew his people. Humans did not imagine things like this. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a photo. It showed him and his crew from 5 years ago, standing in front of their ship after they had driven off a pirate fleet that was terrorizing the trade routes. Good people, brave people, the kind of people who did not run from a fight. Jake pressed his communication button. "Admiral, I want to take the Iron Horse out there. Let me and my crew investigate. Jake, we've already lost 12 ships. I can't risk losing you too. Ma'am, with respect, we can't just sit here while our people disappear. Whatever is out there, it's hunting our ships. It's killing our civilians." That ends now. There was a long pause. Finally, Admiral Cole spoke again. "All right, Commander, but you take only volunteers. And you take our best ship. If there really is something supernatural out there, you'll need every advantage you can get." 2 hours later, Jake stood in the hangar bay of the heavy cruiser. Iron Horse. The ship was Earth's newest and most powerful warship, armed with plasma cannons and protected by energy shields that could stop a nuclear blast. If anything could survive whatever was lurking in the Horsehead Nebula, it would be the Iron Horse. His crew was already assembling. Casey Mitchell was checking her fighter plane, running her hands along its sleek hull like a cowboy checking his. Horse before a long ride. Casey had grown up on a ranch in Texas before joining the Space Force. She could fly anything with wings or engines, and she had never met a challenge she would not face head-on. Chief Engineer Bobby Rodriguez was down in the engine room, making sure every system was running perfectly. Bobby came from a family of mechanics. His grandfather had fixed cars, his father had repaired starships, and Bobby could make any machine sing like a choir. If the Iron Horse broke down in enemy territory, Bobby would find a way to get them home. Dr. Linda Hayes was in the medical bay, preparing for casualties. Linda had served on the frontier worlds where medical supplies were scarce, and the nearest hospital was light years away. She had saved lives with nothing but determination and basic equipment. If anyone got hurt on this mission, Linda would patch them up and keep them fighting. Navigator Pete Johnson was on the bridge, plotting their course through the nebula. Pete had guided ships through asteroid fields, solar storms, and hostile territory. He knew space like a sailor knows the sea, and he could find a path through dangers that would destroy. Lesser navigators, Jake walked onto the bridge and looked at his crew. These were good people, the best Earth had to offer. They all knew the risks, but not one of them had hesitated when he asked for volunteers. "All right, people," Jake said. "We all know what we're up against. Ships are vanishing in the Horsehead Nebula. Something is out there, and it's hunting our people. We're going to find out what it is, and we're going to stop it." Casey looked up from her control panel. "Any idea what we're dealing with, Commander?" The survivors talk about ghost ships, vessels that glow and move without engines. Could be some kind of new alien technology. Could be something else entirely. Either way, we're not coming back without answers. Bobby's voice came through the communication system from the engine room. "All systems green, Commander. The Iron Horse is ready to ride." Jake nodded and sat down in his captain's chair. "Pete, set course for the Horsehead Nebula. Casey, get your fighter ready for launch. Linda, be prepared for anything. We don't know what we're flying into, but whatever it is, we'll face it together." The Iron Horse turned toward the stars and began its journey into the unknown. Behind them, Earth grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light in the darkness. Ahead of them waited the Horsehead Nebula, and whatever horrors lurked within its swirling clouds of gas and dust. Jake stared out at the approaching nebula and thought about the 8,000 people aboard the New Montana. Somewhere in that cosmic storm, they might still be alive. Somewhere in that darkness, answers waited to be found. The hunt for the Ghost Riders had begun. The Iron Horse flew through space for 3 days before reaching the edge of the Horsehead Nebula. Jake stood on the bridge, watching the massive cloud of gas and dust grow larger on the main screen. The nebula looked like a giant horse's head, made of purple and red mist stretching across millions of miles of space. "Sensors are picking up strange readings, Commander," Pete said from his navigation station. "Energy patterns I've never seen before. They're moving around inside the nebula like they're alive." Casey looked up from her pilot controls. "My fighters? Ready to launch, sir. Just say the word." "Not yet," Jake replied. "Let's see what we're dealing with first. Bobby, how are our shields?" Bobby's voice came through the ship's communication system. "Shields are at full power, Commander. But I'm getting weird readings from the engines. It's like something is trying to interfere with our systems." Dr. Linda Hayes spoke from her medical station. "I'm detecting some kind of psychic energy coming from the nebula. It's faint, but it's there. Whatever is in that cloud, it might be able to affect our minds." Jake nodded grimly. "Everyone stay alert. We're going in." The Iron Horse entered the nebula slowly. The swirling gases surrounded the ship like a cosmic storm. Lightning crackled between the clouds, but this lightning was wrong. It moved too slowly, and it glowed with colors that hurt to look at. "Commander," Pete called out, his voice tense. "I'm picking up debris on the scanner. Looks like ship. Wreckage about 2 miles ahead." "Take us there, Pete. Slow and careful." As they approached the debris field, Jake felt his blood run cold. The twisted metal floating in space had once been human ships. He could see pieces of the cargo vessel Blue Ridge, parts of the passenger liner Golden Eagle, and fragments from at least 6 other vessels. But something was wrong with the wreckage. The metal was torn and twisted, but not from weapon fire or explosions. It looked like the ships had been ripped apart from the inside, as if their own crews had gone mad and destroyed everything around them. "My God," Linda whispered as she studied. "The readings, the damage patterns. It's like the people on these ships turned on each other. The blast marks are all from human weapons, fired at close range." Casey flew her fighter through the debris field, her cameras recording everything. "Commander, I'm seeing escape pods. Some of them are intact." "Maybe there are survivors. Bring them aboard," Jake ordered. "But be careful. Something made these people destroy their own ships." The Iron Horse's recovery bay brought in 4 escape pods. When the medical team opened them, they found 7 survivors. All of them were unconscious, and their faces were twisted with fear even in sleep. Linda worked quickly to examine the survivors. "They're alive, but barely. Their brain activity is strange. It's like they're trapped in a nightmare they can't wake up from." One of the survivors suddenly opened her eyes and grabbed Linda's arm. The woman was young, maybe 25, with short brown hair and the uniform of a cargo ship engineer. "Don't let it in," the woman whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "Don't let it into your head. It feeds on fear. It feeds on despair. Once it gets inside, you can't fight it." "What gets inside?" Linda asked gently. "What attacked your ships?" The woman's grip tightened. "The Ghost Riders. Ships made of starlight and shadow. They came out of nowhere, moving like they were riding the wind. Their crews were dead, but they were still flying, still fighting." Before Linda could ask more questions, the woman's eyes rolled back, and she fell unconscious. Again, Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He activated his communication device. "All crew members, this is the commander. We may be dealing with some kind of psychic entity. Stay together, watch each other for signs of mental disturbance, and report anything unusual immediately." Pete's voice suddenly cut through the ship's communication system, filled with panic. "Commander, we have contacts approaching fast. Multiple ships bearing down on us from all directions." Jake rushed to the main screen and saw them. 6 ships were emerging from the swirling gases of the nebula, but these were not normal vessels. They glowed with an eerie blue light, and Jake could see through their hulls as if they were made of glass. The ships moved in perfect formation, like cavalry charging across a battlefield. "Battle stations," Jake ordered. "All hands to combat positions." The ghost ships opened fire, but their weapons were unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, they fired streams of pure terror that struck directly at the minds of the Iron Horse's crew. Casey screamed as waves of fear washed over her. She saw her worst nightmares playing out in her mind, her family's ranch burning, her fighter plane crashing, everyone she loved dying while she watched helplessly. Bobby fell to his knees in the engine room, overwhelmed by visions of every machine he had ever worked on exploding and killing innocent people. He saw himself as a failure, a man whose incompetence had doomed everyone who trusted him. Pete collapsed at his navigation station, lost in a maze of cosmic horror where every star was a burning eye watching him, judging him, finding him wanting. Only Linda and Jake seemed to resist the mental assault. Linda had trained her mind to stay calm in medical emergencies, while Jake's years of command had taught him to push through fear and doubt. It's trying to break us, Jake shouted over the sound of his crew's screams. It feeds on our despair. Fight back. Remember who you are. Remember why you're here. Jake grabbed the ship's communication microphone and began to speak, his voice carrying to every corner of the Iron Horse. I am Commander Jake Sullivan of the Earth Defense Force. I have served humanity for 20 years, and I have never surrendered to any enemy. These Ghost Riders think they can break us with fear, but they don't know what humans are made of. His words seemed to cut through the psychic fog. Casey stopped screaming and forced herself back to her controls. Bobby struggled to his feet and began working on the engines again. Pete shook his head clear and returned to his navigation duties. The ghost ship circled the Iron Horse like wolves around prey. Jake could see figures moving on their bridges, the shapes of men and women who had once been human but were now something else. Their faces were pale and empty, their eyes glowing with the same blue light as their ships. They're the crews of the missing ships, Linda said, studying the readings. The entity has enslaved them, turned them into its servants. They're trapped, forced to attack other humans to feed their master. One of the ghost ships broke formation and charged directly at the Iron Horse. Jake could see its captain, clearly now, a middle-aged man in a merchant marine uniform, his face twisted with anguish as he fought against the force controlling him. He's trying to resist, Jake realized. Part of him is still human, still fighting. The ghost ship's weapons fired again, but this time the mental attack was weaker. The enslaved captain was holding back, using what little free will he had left. To protect the living. That's our chance, Jake said. If we can help them remember who they were, maybe we can break the entity's control. Casey, can you get close to that ship without being destroyed? Casey wiped the sweat from her forehead and managed a grim smile. Commander, I've ridden bulls that were meaner than these ghost ships. I can dance with them all day long. The battle for the souls of the dead was about to begin. Casey launched her fighter from the Iron Horse and dove toward the nearest ghost ship. The phantom vessel moved like smoke in the wind, but Casey had been flying since she was 16 years old. She knew how to read the patterns of movement, how to predict where her target would be docked. As she flew closer, the ghost ship's captain appeared on her communication screen. His face was pale and his eyes glowed with blue light, but Casey could see the pain behind that glow. The man was fighting against something inside his own mind. "Help me," the captain whispered, his voice barely audible through the static. "I can't stop myself. It makes me attack, makes me hunt. I don't want to hurt anyone." Casey felt her heart break for the trapped man. "What's your name, Captain?" "William ... William Morgan of the cargo ship Blue Ridge. I've been fighting this thing for weeks, but I'm getting weaker. Soon I won't be able to resist at all." Before Casey could respond, Captain Morgan's face twisted with rage. The entity controlling him had taken over again. His ghost ship fired its terror weapons at Casey's fighter, but the attack was still weaker than it should have been. Some part of Morgan was still holding back. Meanwhile, on the Iron Horse's bridge, Jake was having his own conversation with the darkness. A voice echoed in his mind, ancient and cold as the space between stars. "You cannot win, human," the voice said. "I have existed since before your son was born. I have consumed entire civilizations. Your little ship and your tiny crew are nothing to me." Jake pressed his hands against his temples, fighting the psychic intrusion. "Who are you? What do you want?" Images flooded Jake's mind. He saw a massive creature drifting through space, larger than a moon. It had once been part of a proud alien race, but something had gone wrong. Its people had died, leaving it alone in the endless dark. For millions of years, it had wandered from star to star, growing mad with loneliness. "I am the last of the Void Singers," the entity said. "My people could travel between dimensions, but we were too curious. We opened doors that should have stayed closed. A plague of madness swept through our worlds, and I alone survived." Jake saw more images. The entity feeding on the death of civilizations, not out of evil, but out of desperate need. It created phantom fleets from the souls of the dead because it could not bear to be alone. But its touch corrupted everything it tried to preserve. I don't want to destroy, the entity continued. I want companions. I want friends. But every time I try to save someone, they die. Every time I try to help, I cause more pain. So I take their souls instead. At least then they stay with me forever. Jake felt a wave of pity for the creature, but he pushed it aside. You're killing innocent people. You're enslaving their souls. That's not friendship. That's torture. It's the only way I know, the entity replied. I've been alone for so long. I've forgotten how to be gentle. I've forgotten how to love without destroying. While Jake battled in his mind, Dr. Linda Hayes was working frantically in the medical bay. She had discovered something important about the entity's power. The creature fed on despair and fear, but there was something it could not digest: hope. Bobby, she called over the communication system, I need you to route power to the medical bay. I think I know how to help the survivors. Bobby was in the engine room, his hands shaking as he worked. The entity's influence was strong here, among the machines and power systems. He kept seeing visions of every engine failure he had ever caused, every time his work had let someone down. I can't, he whispered. I'm not good enough. I'll just make things worse. Bobby Rodriguez, Linda said firmly, you listen to me. I've worked with a lot of engineers, and you're the best I've ever seen. Your engines have never failed when it mattered. Your work has saved more lives than you know. Now I need you to save more. Bobby took a deep breath and forced himself to focus. Linda was right. He was good at his job. He had never let his crew down when they really needed him. He began rerouting power to the medical bay, his hands steady and sure dot in the pa. Medical bay. Linda was treating the survivors from the escape pods. She had discovered that the entity's control was strongest when people were afraid or despairing. But when they remembered good things, love, hope, joy, the creature's hold weakened. She began playing music through the medical bay speakers. Old songs from Earth, songs about home and family and never giving up. The survivors began to stir, their faces becoming less twisted with fear. The young engineer who had spoken before opened her eyes again. This time, she looked more like herself. My name is Corinne Bell, she said. I was the chief engineer on the cargo ship, Mountain Star. We were hauling medical supplies to the colony on Kepler 438b when the ghost ships attacked. What happened to your crew? Linda asked. The entity got into our heads. It showed us our worst fears, our deepest regrets. Most of the crew went mad. They started fighting each other, destroying the ship from inside. I managed to get to an escape pod, but I could hear them screaming even as I flew away. Linda nodded. The entity feeds on negative emotions, but it can't handle positive ones. That's why some of you survived. You held on to hope. Outside the ship, Casey was still dancing with the ghost ships. Her fighter moved like a bird in flight, dodging their attacks while trying to get close enough to communicate with the enslaved crews. Casey, Jake's voice came through her radio. I've been talking to the entity. It's not evil, just lonely and insane. It's been alone for millions of years. Maybe we can find another way to deal with this. What do you mean, Commander? I mean, maybe we don't have to destroy it. Maybe we can help it. Casey barely avoided a blast from Captain Morgan's ship. With respect, sir, this thing is trying to kill us. I'm not feeling too charitable right now. The entity doesn't know how to connect with others without destroying them, Jake explained. It's like a child who hugs too hard and kills the things it loves. But what if we could teach it a better way? Navigator Pete Johnson suddenly spoke up from his station. Commander, I'm detecting a massive structure at the center of the nebula. It's huge, bigger than a space station. The energy readings are off the charts. Jake studied the sensor data. That must be the entity's base, the source of its power. Dr. Hayes' voice came through the communication system. Commander, I think I know how to weaken the entity's control over the ghost ships. But we need to get closer to that structure. We need to broadcast something directly into its power source. What kind of broadcast? Jake asked. Hope, sir. Pure, undiluted human hope. The entity feeds on despair, but hope is like poison to it. Not enough to kill it, but enough to make it sick. Enough to make it let go of the souls it's holding. Jake looked at his crew. Casey was still fighting the ghost. Ship's outside. Bobby was keeping the engines running despite the entity's interference. Pete was plotting a course through the deadly nebula. Linda was caring for the survivors and finding ways to fight back. These were good people, brave people. The kind of people who never gave up, no matter how bad things got. All right, people, Jake said. We're going to the heart of this thing. We're going to face the entity on its home ground. And we're going to show it what humans are really made of. The Iron Horse turned toward the center of the nebula, where an ancient alien structure waited in the darkness. The ghost ships followed, their enslaved crews crying out for help that might finally come. The real battle was about to begin. The Iron Horse flew deeper into the nebula, following Pete's navigation toward the massive structure at its center. The ghost ships followed them like a pack of wolves, but they kept their distance. Something was holding them back. The entity is getting stronger the closer we get to its base, Dr. Hayes said, studying her instruments. But it's also getting more confused. I think our presence is affecting it in ways it doesn't understand. Jake could feel the creature's mind pressing against his own, trying to break through his mental defenses. The images it showed him were getting more desperate. He saw the entity's home world as it had been millions of years ago, a beautiful planet filled with crystalline cities and graceful beings who could sing songs that opened doorways between dimensions. We were explorers, the entity's voice whispered. In Jake's mind, we wanted to see everything, to know everything. But we went too far. We opened a door to a place of madness, and the madness came through. It infected my people, turned them against each other. I watched them destroy themselves while I hid in the deep places of our world. Jake saw the entity's escape from its dying planet, its long journey through the void, its growing insanity as the centuries passed. You don't have to be alone anymore, Jake said to the creature. There are other ways to find companionship. No, the entity replied. I've tried. Every time I approach other beings, they die. My touch is poison. My presence brings madness. The only way I can keep companions is to take their souls after they die. As they flew closer to the structure, Casey's fighter was surrounded by more ghost ships. She counted at least 20 vessels, all of them glowing with that eerie blue light. The enslaved crews were fighting harder now, their attacks more coordinated. They're getting desperate, Casey reported. The entity must be pushing them harder. One of the ghost ships broke formation and charged directly at Casey's fighter. She rolled to avoid its weapons, but this time the pilot was ready for her move. The ghost ship's captain was a young woman about Casey's age, wearing the uniform of a passenger liner pilot. Please don't make me do this, the ghost woman said over the radio. I don't want to hurt you. My name is Susan Clark. I was taking families to New Terra when the entity caught us. I've been fighting it for weeks, but I'm so tired. Casey felt tears in her eyes. Susan, listen to me. You're stronger than this thing. You're a pilot, right? You know what it feels like to fly free. Remember that feeling. Remember what it was like to choose your own course. For a moment, Susan's ghost ship wavered. The blue glow around it flickered, and Casey could see the real woman underneath the entity's control. But then the creature's power surged, and Susan's face twisted with pain. I can't fight it anymore, Susan screamed. It's too strong. I'm sorry. The ghost ship fired everything it had at Casey's fighter, but at the last second, Susan managed to turn the weapons aside. The blast missed Casey by inches. She's still fighting, Casey realized. Even under the entity's control, she's still trying to protect me. Back on the Iron Horse, Bobby was having problems of his own. The ship's engines were acting strange, sometimes speeding up and sometimes slowing down without his commands. The entity was trying to take control of the ship's systems. "Commander," Bobby called out, "the entity is in our computers. It's trying to turn our own ship against us." Jake made a decision. "Bobby, shut down all automated systems. We go to manual control only. If this thing wants to fight us, it'll have to do it the old-fashioned way." The Iron Horse's lights dimmed as Bobby switched to manual control. Now every system on the ship had to be operated by hand, but at least the entity couldn't take control of them. "Pete, can you still navigate without the computer?" Pete smiled grimly. "Commander, I learned to navigate by the stars before I ever saw a computer. I can get us where we need to go." As they approached the center of the nebula, the massive structure finally came into view. It was a city-sized ship, but it was like no vessel Jake had ever seen. The hull was made of what looked like crystallized starlight, and it pulsed with the same blue glow as the ghost ships. "That's it," Dr. Hayes said. "That's the entity's home, the power source for everything." Jake could feel the creature's presence growing stronger. It was ancient beyond measure, and it was desperately lonely. But it was also incredibly dangerous. "We're going to dock with that ship," Jake announced. "We're going to board it and face the entity directly." "Sir," Casey said over the radio. "That sounds like suicide." "Maybe," Jake replied. "But we can't fight this thing from out here. We need to get close enough to show it what we really are. We need to make it understand that there's another way." The Iron Horse approached the alien vessel slowly. The ghost ships formed a circle around them, but they didn't attack. Their enslaved crews were watching, hoping, praying for freedom. As they got closer, Jake could see that the alien ship was damaged. Parts of its hull were cracked, and some sections were completely missing. The entity had been alone for so long that it had forgotten how to maintain its own home. "It's dying," Dr. Hayes said softly. "The entity is dying. That's why it's so desperate to find companions. It knows it doesn't have much time left." Jake felt a wave of sadness wash over him. The entity wasn't just lonely. It was afraid. Afraid of dying alone, afraid of being forgotten, afraid that its entire civilization would vanish without a trace. "Docking sequence initiated," Pete announced. "We're going aboard." The Iron Horse connected with the alien vessel through an airlock that adjusted itself to fit their ship. The entity was allowing them to board, but Jake knew it could be a trap. "Remember," Jake told his crew, "this thing has been alone for millions of years. It doesn't understand how to interact with others without causing harm. We need to be careful, but we also need to be compassionate." They entered the alien ship through the airlock. The corridors were vast and beautiful, but they were also empty and cold. The walls were covered with crystalline formations that glowed softly, casting strange shadows everywhere. As they walked deeper into the ship, Jake could hear singing. It was a low, mournful sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The entity was singing the death songs of its people, the last survivor of a proud race. "It's beautiful," Dr. Hayes whispered, "and so sad." They reached a vast chamber at the heart of the ship. In the center of the room was a pillar of pure energy, and floating above it was the entity itself. It was larger than Jake had expected, but also more fragile. The creature looked like it was made of starlight and shadow, constantly shifting between solid and ethereal forms. "So," the entity said, its voice echoing through the chamber, "you have come to face me. You have come to destroy the last of the Void Singers." Jake stepped forward, his crew beside him. "No," he said. "We've come to help you. We've come to show you that you don't have to be alone anymore." The entity laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "Help me? I am death itself. I am the end of all things. Everyone I touch dies. Everyone I try to save becomes a monster." "That's because you're trying too hard," Jake replied. "You're holding on so tight that you're crushing the very thing you want to protect. But there's another way. There's a way to connect with others without destroying them. The entity's form flickered with uncertainty. Impossible. I've tried everything. No, Jake said. You've tried to take. You've tried to control. But you've never tried to give. You've never tried to let go. The real test was about to begin. The entity hovered above its energy pillar, its form shifting like smoke in the wind. Jake could feel its power pressing against his mind, but he stood firm. His crew stood beside him, each of them fighting their own battle against the creatures. Influence. You speak of giving and letting go, the entity said, its voice filled with pain. But I have nothing left to give. My people are dead. My world is dust. I am the last memory of a civilization that reached too far and fell into darkness. Casey felt the entity's despair washing over her like a cold wave. She saw visions of herself alone on her family's ranch, everyone she loved gone, the land empty and dead. But she fought back with memories of better times, her father teaching her to ride, her mother's laugh, the feeling of flying free through open sky. You're not alone anymore, Casey said to the entity. We're here. We chose to come here. We chose to face you. The entity's attention turned to her, and Casey felt its power trying to break her mind. But she had grown up breaking wild horses and riding in rodeos. She knew how to stay calm when something dangerous was trying to throw her. Bobby was having a harder time. The entity's influence was strong here, and he could feel it trying to turn him against his friends. He saw visions of his hands destroying the Iron Horse's engines, of his mistakes killing everyone he cared about. Bobby, Dr. Hayes called out, remember who you are. Remember all the lives you saved with your work. Bobby gritted his teeth and focused on the truth. He was a good engineer. His work was solid and reliable. His engines had never failed when it mattered most. The visions were lies designed to break his spirit. The entity sensed Bobby's resistance and grew angry. You resist me, but you cannot win. I will show you despair like you have never known. Suddenly, the chamber filled with the ghostly forms of all the people who had died in the nebula. Hundreds of men, women, and children appeared around Jake and his crew, their faces twisted with pain and madness. These are my companions, the entity said, the souls I have collected. They serve me now, and they will serve me forever. But Jake noticed something the entity had missed. Some of the ghostly figures were fighting against their bonds. Captain Morgan from the Blue Ridge was there, and he was shaking his head, trying to clear it. Susan Clark from the passenger liner was struggling to speak. They're still in there, Jake realized. The real people are still fighting. Dr. Hayes stepped forward, pulling out a small device from her medical kit. I've been working on this while we traveled through the nebula. It's a neural amplifier. It can boost human brain waves and emotions. What are you going to do with it? Jake asked. I'm going to broadcast hope, Linda replied. Pure human hope, amplified and focused. If the entity feeds on despair, then hope should be like poison to it. The entity heard her words and its form flickered with fear. No, you don't understand. If you break my control, the souls will be free. But they will also be lost forever. At least now they exist in some form. That's not your choice to make, Jake said firmly. Freedom is better than slavery, even if freedom means death. Linda activated her device, and suddenly the chamber was filled with a warm golden light. The neural amplifier took the hope and determination from Jake's crew and made it stronger, broadcasting it throughout the alien ship. The effect was immediate. The ghostly figures began to glow with their own light, and their faces became more human. Captain Morgan straightened up and looked directly at the entity. You held us for too long, he said, his voice growing stronger. We choose to be free. Other souls began to speak up. Susan Clark from the passenger liner stepped forward. We're not your companions. We're your prisoners. Let us go. The entity's form began to shake and waver. But if you leave me, I'll be alone again. I can't bear the loneliness. It's been so long since I had anyone to talk to. Pete Johnson, who had been quiet throughout the confrontation, suddenly spoke up. You know, back on Earth, I had a dog named Ranger. He was old and sick, and I knew he was going to die soon. I could have tried to keep him alive with machines and medicine, but that wouldn't have been kind. Sometimes loving something means letting it go. The entity turned its attention to Pete. Your dog was dying. These souls are already dead. I'm giving them a form of existence they wouldn't have otherwise. But what kind of existence? Dr. Hayes asked. Trapped in madness, forced to attack innocent people, never able to rest or find peace. That's not life. That's torture. The entities. Power surged, and suddenly half of Jake's crew was gone. Casey, Bobby, and Pete had vanished, replaced by ghostly versions of themselves with glowing blue eyes. Now you are mine as well, the entity said. Your souls will join my collection, and you will serve me as the others do. But the ghostly Casey smiled, and it wasn't the empty smile of a controlled spirit. You made a mistake, she said. You took our bodies, but you didn't break our spirits. The ghostly Bobby nodded. We're still us. We're still free inside. Jake realized what had happened. The entity was so desperate for companions that it had taken his crew without properly enslaving them first. They were ghosts now, but they were still themselves. You see, Jake said to the entity, real friendship isn't about control. It's about choice. These people choose to stand with me. They choose to fight for what's right, even when it's dangerous. Linda's neural amplifier was still broadcasting hope, and now it was amplified by the determination of Jake's entire crew, both living and ghostly. The other trapped souls began to break free from the entity's control one by one. The entity felt its power slipping away, but instead of anger, it felt something it hadn't experienced in millions of years. It felt the warmth of genuine connection, not the forced companionship of enslaved souls, but the real friendship of beings who chose to stand together. I don't understand, the entity said, its voice smaller now, more confused and angry. You're destroying everything I've built. You're taking away my companions, but I don't feel angry anymore. Jake stepped closer to the energy pillar. That's because this is what real friendship feels like. It's not about holding on. It's about being there for each other when you choose to be. The entity's form began to change, becoming less fearsome and more sorrowful. But when you leave, I'll be alone again. And this time, I won't have the strength to collect more souls. I'll die alone in the darkness. Maybe, Jake said gently. But maybe not. There are other ways to find companionship. Other ways to be remembered. The trapped souls were breaking free faster now, their ghostly forms becoming brighter and more peaceful. They were choosing to move on, to find whatever came after death, rather than remain as the entity's prisoners, but some of them paused before they disappeared. Captain Morgan approached the entity one last time. Thank you, he said quietly. I know you didn't mean to hurt us. You were just scared and lonely. I forgive you. Other souls echoed his words. Susan Clark nodded to the entity before she faded away. You don't have to be a monster. You can choose to be better. The entity watched as its companions chose freedom, and for the first time in millions of years, it felt something other than loneliness and despair. It felt peace. The final battle was about to reach its conclusion. The entity floated above its energy pillar, watching as the last of the trapped souls chose freedom and faded into peaceful light. For the first time in millions of years, the chamber was quiet except for the gentle humming of the crystalline. Jake stood with Dr. Hayes, the only living members of their crew left in the chamber. Casey, Bobby, and Pete existed now as spirits, but they were still themselves, still free to choose their own path. It's over, the entity said, its voice barely a whisper. They're all gone. My companions, my prisoners, my reason for existing. I'm alone again. But ghostly Casey stepped forward, her spirit form glowing with warm light instead of the cold blue of the entity's control. No, You're not alone. We're still here. But you're free now, the entity replied. You can leave whenever you want. You can move on to whatever comes after death. Why would you stay with me? Bobby's spirit smiled. Because that's what friends do. They stick around when things get tough, Pete nodded. We don't have to stay forever, but we don't have to leave. Right now, either. We can choose to spend some time with you, help you figure out a better way to live. The entity's form shimmered with confusion. I don't understand. I enslaved you. I turned you into weapons against your own people. How can you forgive me? Jake, step closer to the energy pillar. Because we understand what loneliness does to people. We've all been alone at some point in our lives. We know what it feels like to be so desperate for connection that you make bad choices. Dr. Hayes activated her neural amplifier again, but this time she wasn't broadcasting hope or defiance. She was broadcasting memories of compassion, images of humans helping each other, forgiving each other, choosing to heal instead of hurt. Entity absorbed these memories and felt something it had never experienced before. It felt the warmth of unconditional love, the peace of forgiveness, the joy of second chances. Your people, the entity said, studying the memories. They hurt each other sometimes, but they also help each other. They make mistakes, but they learn from them. They die, but they're remembered. That's right, Jake said. Being human isn't about being perfect. It's about trying to be better than you were yesterday. The entity's form began to change again. Instead of the shifting mass of starlight and shadow, it took on a more solid appearance. It looked like one of its own people for millions of years ago, but gentler somehow, more at peace. I want to try, the entity said. I want to learn how to be a friend instead of a captor. But I don't know how to start. Casey's spirit floated closer to the creature. Start by letting go. You've been holding on to your pain and loneliness for so long that you've forgotten how to feel anything else. Let it go. The entity looked around its vast chamber, at the crystalline walls and the energy pillar that had been its prison for so long. If I let go of my pain, what will I have left? Possibilities, Dr. Hayes said simply. A chance to create something new instead of trying to preserve something dead. The entity closed its eyes and took what might have been its first deep breath in millions of years. As it exhaled, the blue glow that had filled the chamber began to fade. The cold, harsh light was replaced by something warmer, softer. I can feel them, the entity said suddenly. The souls I held captive. They're not gone. They're at peace. They're free. But they're also grateful. They forgive me. Jake felt tears in his eyes. That's what redemption feels like. That's what it means to make things right. The energy pillar began to dim, and the entity's form became more solid, more real. I don't need this anymore, it said, gesturing to the pillar. I was using it to anchor myself to this dimension, to force myself to exist. But I don't want to force anything anymore. What will you do now? Pete asked. The entity smiled, and it was the first genuine smile it had worn in millions of years. I think I'd like to learn about your people. I'd like to understand how you build friendships that don't require chains. Maybe I can even help sometimes, instead of always taking. Bobby's spirit grinned. Well, you've got a pretty impressive ship here, and there are a lot of people in the galaxy who could use help. Maybe you could be like a cosmic rescue service. The idea seemed to spark something in the entity. Yes, instead of hunting ships, I could help them. Instead of creating ghost riders of death, I could create guardians of life. Dr. Hayes felt a warm sensation as her physical body began to rematerialize. The entity was returning her and Jake to full life, no longer needing to hold on to anything. Or anyone. The colonists from the New Montana, Jake said suddenly. The 8,000 people who were aboard when you took the ship. They're safe, the entity replied. I have them in a kind of sleep, protected from the madness. I was spreading. I can wake them up now. I can send them home. Over the next several hours, the entity began the work of redemption. The colonists from all the captured ships were awakened and healed. The Ghost Fleet was transformed from instruments of terror into rescue vessels, staffed by volunteers who had chosen to help rather than be forced to fight. Casey, Bobby, and Pete were given a choice. They could return to life, or they could move on to whatever came after death, or they could stay as spirits and help the entity learn to be better. Casey chose to return to life. "I've got too much flying left to do," she said with a laugh. Bobby also chose to return. "Somebody's got to keep the Iron Horse running," he explained. But Pete surprised everyone. "I think I'll stay for a while," he said. "This old navigator has seen a lot of space, but I've never seen anything like this. I'd like to help chart a new course." The entity was grateful, but insisted that Pete could leave whenever he wanted. No more chains, it promised. No more cages. Only choices. As the Iron Horse prepared to leave the nebula, Jake stood on the bridge watching the transformation taking place around them. The harsh blue light was gone, replaced by gentle colors that reminded him of sunset on Earth. The ghost ships were still there, but now they moved with purpose instead of hunger. "Commander," Casey said from her pilot station, "we're getting a transmission from Earth. Admiral Cole wants to know our status." Jake smiled and opened the communication channel. "Admiral, this is Commander Sullivan. Mission accomplished. The threat in the Horsehead Nebula has been neutralized." "What was it, Jake? What were we dealing with?" Jake thought for a moment about how to explain what had happened. "It was a ghost story, Admiral. But like all the best ghost stories, it had a happy ending." As the Iron Horse emerged from the nebula, Jake looked back one last time. In the distance, he could see the entity's ship, no longer a prison, but a home. The creature that had once been the terror of the void was now its protector, and the Ghost Riders who had once brought death now carried hope to anyone in need. The stars seemed brighter, somehow as if the darkness between them had been replaced by something better. And in the depths of space, where loneliness had once reigned supreme, friendship had found a way to take root and grow. The legend of the Ghost Riders would continue, but now it would be a story of salvation rather than doom. In the vast emptiness between the stars, humanity had proven once again that no one had to face the darkness alone.